So this is the Service Canada office that I was standing outside for a few days last week, and that we saw Service Canada workers marching outside of for more than a week. So let's go and march where they were marching, because they are no longer there. The strike is over.
They have a deal. After 12 full days off the job, the largest nationwide public sector strike we have seen in decades comes to an end.
Breaking news from home this morning. We got the announcement around 2 o'clock Eastern that there is a tentative deal in one of the largest strikes in Canadian history. The Public Service Alliance of Canada has reached that tentative deal with the federal government for more than 120,000 workers at the Treasury Board.
So the PSAC strike is over, and the marching orders are get back to work as of 9 a.m. Eastern this morning. But just because the strike is over doesn't mean the story is over. Oh no. So what does this tentative agreement actually mean? What was tentatively agreed to, and what are the loose ends? And spoiler alert, there are a couple. So first thing, it's really important to be clear about is that this news only applies to most, not all, of the workers who are on strike. Because with the Public Service Alliance of Canada, the PSAC negotiations, there were actually two main bargaining units with separate demands. So there were 120,000 Treasury Board employees, which covers, so many federal jobs, from passport processors, immigration employees, the people who dole out your pension payments, RCMP, lighthouse workers, Coast Guard, food inspectors, so that sort of thing. It's a massive number of workers, and it's why the strike was followed so closely by Canadians. So they've reached an agreement. The holdouts, Canada Revenue Agency, a smaller group of about 35,000 people who, most notably process your tax returns, and yes, it is tax season. They're not included in this agreement. They're still on strike. Clear? Okay. So what's the deal? Well, let's start with wages, because that was a big sticking point. So you'll recall the government's offer was to give a 9% raise over 3 years. And that would have covered 2021, 2022, and 2023 as a way of compensating for how high inflation has been. And, averaged out, you can think of that as 3% per year. The union was looking for 13.5% and averaged out over the same period. And averaged out, that works out to closer to 4.5% per year. Bear with me with this squeaky marker. So both sides have now agreed to this instead. And just hold on while I do this here. So for 2021, a 1.5% increase. 2022, a 4.75% increase. 2023, a 3% increase. And 2024, 2.25. If you add all of that up, that equals 11.5%. Ta-da! Right? If you look over here, the total looks like they met in the middle, but they didn't really, because what they agreed to, as you can see, is now a 4-year deal. Now the government says this averages out, and they're right on this, it averages out to less than 3% per year. So, they would likely frame this as a win. The Treasury Board president calls it fair, competitive, and reasonable. But interestingly, the union also frames this as a win, because they say there's also, if we change this 3 to 3.5%, they say there's also a 0.5% wage adjustment in 2023. The government calls this an allowance, so we don't exactly know what that is, and we won't until we can actually read the full agreement. But the union also says this, that the total adds up to 12.6%. And this is torquing the numbers a little bit, but it's true. So it's true if you take compounding into account, and I'll explain what I mean. So, in 2022, employees are getting a 4.75% raise on an improved salary, thanks to the previous year's increase. So if you do that kind of math, that compounding it does indeed add up to 12.6% as a raise, compounded until the end of the 2024 fiscal year. I say it's torquing because we haven't been talking about negotiations in quite that way. We've just been looking at the increases each year in isolation. So, broadly, let's just call it a 12% raise over 4 years, with an extra year of certainty equaling an extra year of stability. But that's not all. The union has also secured a one-time lump sum payment for its members of $2,500 for each employee, which is pensionable, meaning it factors into pension calculations once a person retires. Then there are the protections around remote work. So, the union wanted working from home written into their contract, so employees would have more options when it comes to remote work. The government saw that as something that should stay under management control. Like roughly half the week you come in, half the week you stay home, end of story. But a couple of little twists now. So according to the union, the government now has to, according to the agreement, assess each case individually instead of by group. So, that kind of gives individuals a little more flexibility instead of getting lumped into these sort of sweeping edicts. But management would also have to explain their remote work decisions in writing, which starts to create a paper trail so the union can make sure the rules are being fairly and consistently applied across all individuals. Then there are some other things, and literally hundreds of other things, but wages and remote work were two of the biggest sticking points. So where does that leave us? What are the loose ends? Well, the big one that I mentioned off the top, that Canada Revenue Agency employees, they are still on strike. They were asking for a much larger wage increase, a more than 20% raise over 3 years. And they're also apparently hitting a big roadblock in negotiations where it comes to how much remote work each side thinks should be written into the contracts. So until that gets resolved, expect further delays and a growing backlog when it comes to tax season and getting your tax returns back. But also, everything I just mentioned, it's only a tentative agreement. And here's what I mean. The negotiators may have reached a deal, but union members still have to vote yes for it to be official. Now, sometimes it happens where the negotiators will agree to a deal and the union will actually recommend members vote no. That's happened before. In this case, the union recommends its members vote yes, suggesting that they believe this is the best deal they'll be able to get. But it's also happened in recent past where union members still vote no, even when the union tells them to vote yes. So all I'm trying to say is that until we see the results of the vote, this story ain't over. In the next few days, we are expecting to see the full text of the agreement. And then shortly thereafter, union members will get a chance to vote online. So once all of that happens, end of story. Except, of course, the Canada Revenue Agency employees still without a deal and your tax returns still in limbo. And I suppose we should not forget the slew of other unions, right? Like both public and private unions who are looking at these negotiations as a potential framework for their own. So maybe the story isn't over at all. Okay, hope all of that made sense. It's a lot to cram in, but it just happened this morning. We'll be back after this.